Hello and welcome to Contra Mundum. My name is Susanna Eileen Martin. I am your host today. And today I actually have a guest. Say hi, Sharon.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Sharon. She is one of my best friends. I met her a couple years ago during lifeguarding. So, Sharon, the idea behind the show is that everybody is an expert at something. So, do you want to tell our audience what you are an expert at?
Well, I would think, according to all my friends, that I'm the expert in terms of Star Wars.
Star Wars, that's right, yeah. Okay, so how did you get into Star Wars? What was your introduction?
Well, my introduction to Star Wars happened when I was fairly young, around 4 to 5 years old. I remember watching the original trilogy when I was younger, but not really fully understanding it, what was going on. And I had a basic understanding, but when you're little and you see movies like that, you don't necessarily grasp everything. So at first I didn't really catch on, because certain things, of course, at that age don't click. But then as I got older, and ironically, my introduction to the prequels, because my I know this is going to sound pretty bad for a lot of Star Wars fans, but
Nerds,
whatever we'd like to call ourselves.
That's okay.
But
I'm a nerd too, don't worry.
But episode 1 came out when I was around 7 years old, and it was a revamping of the whole franchise, and that sort of got me back into Star Wars because you were starting at a new beginning, you were seeing fresh faces, and it intrigued me, essentially. And so I got to watching Star Wars through the prequels and then going back to the originals once everything solidified and you're at that age where you actually understand the storyline and what's happening in the movies and whatnot. So that's how I became solidified into the whole Star Wars fandom.
That's awesome. Okay, so what did you think of the prequels?
I believe the prequels give a really good understanding to the backstory. Lucas wanted to give a, fairly solid background story to why Darth Vader became the way he was. That's why he started at episode 4. People didn't understand when he was first starting out, why did you start at episode 4 instead of starting at, at the very, very beginning? Well, he wanted to go back and add the backstory and everything with that. So the prequels, I think there are some flaws with them, and I tend to agree. Jar Jar Binks probably was not the best idea, but
Misa annoying.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think it did a very good job of explaining why Anakin fell to the dark side and giving him why we didn't, we probably didn't appreciate Hayden Christensen's acting as much, but it gave us an appreciation that Darth Vader wasn't this complete evil, selfish, hell-bent dictator, that he actually had feelings. He had a loving side to him that made us endear. Yeah, made him, humanized him, made him slightly endearing. But what I personally found myself about the prequels, what I really liked about it, there were a few things I liked. One is it really built up Obi-Wan Kenobi's persona. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you don't see much of anything in him with the original trilogy. He's this old wise man who gives guidance to our young Luke Skywalker and the rebellion, but
he's literally there for like half the movie.
He's alive.
He's
only alive for the first. Yeah, he's only alive for the first 30 minutes of the movie, and then he's a ghost, and you just see him...
Useless ghost.
Well, not entirely useless. I mean, he gives vital information like the fact, spoiler alert, that Leia is Luke's twin sister, but you get a great appreciation for him as a leader, as a warrior. I mean, the fact that he kills... I mean, according to the movie, of course, in Clone Wars, we know that Darth Maul is still alive, but he defeats the first Sith Lord to come across the galaxy in 1,000 years. He then ends up maiming the supreme powerful Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith. So you get and of course, let's not forget, taking on a half, I don't know if we call him human, but General Grievous, taking on General Grievous wielding 4 lightsabers at a time, pretty impressive. So it really solidified Obi-Wan's role in the universe, in the Star Wars universe. The second thing I really appreciated about the prequels is that when we look at the personalities of Anakin and Padme, I actually found out that Anakin has more similar traits that he shares with Leia than Luke does with Anakin. Everybody assumes that, okay, Luke's a Jedi, Anakin's a Jedi, they have that Force connection, they're so much alike, but...
I'm pretty sure Luke would have been a mama's boy.
Yeah, the thing is, I see a lot now, everybody sees the similarities, of course, between Leia and Padme, both of royal heritage, both
Strong
diplomats.
Confident ladies.
Yes, very, very, very strong female persona. However, what I found interesting was in Return of the Jedi, when Vader and Luke are in their final duel, Darth Vader comes to the realization that Leia is his daughter, and he taunts Luke and says, well, perhaps if you don't turn to the dark side, then she will, more or less. I probably misquoted that, but we're going to roll with it. And Luke is frightened at that moment because Leia has not had proper training in how to shield her mind, control her feelings. And when you look at Leia throughout the films, she's way more snarky. She embodies Anakin's persona way more than Luke ever does. Luke embodies, of course, the whiny aspect of Anakin very, very well, but he is also extremely merciful, extremely kind, and sees the good in his father, which, of course, was Padme's dying words. She's telling Obi-Wan there's still good in him. And that's eventually what leads to Vader's redemption. So I find that watching the prequels lent a better understanding of the twins and the similarities between their parents. And third and finally, what I really liked about the prequels was that it opened a whole new side of Star Wars, new worlds, new experiences, sights that we
New
don't
CGI.
really... Well, I mean, it opened, like, it expanded it more, gave us more depth, gave us more knowledge into what we understand about Star Wars as a whole.
Yeah, so what would you think is your favorite movie?
That's I would go with the standard. I think this is the most popular among most Star Wars fans is Episode 5. I mean,
Which is
Empire Strikes Back.
Okay. You gotta remember, I still haven't seen 6, so
Okay.
don't be nice to me, Star Wars fans.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Of course, because we have the big reveal, we have layers of deception, betrayal. And
was that a reveal for you? Did you watch that?
I mean, of course, when a movie's been
twist?
out for 30 years or so, I mean, you already know that.
You've heard the famous line.
Actually, it's the most misquoted line in movie history. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people will say, "Luke, I am your father," when really it's, "No, I am your father."
Yeah.
It's actually, yes, they recorded that it was...
I actually met someone the other day that watched it fresh and somehow had never heard that and was surprised. I don't know how they managed to do that, but hey, if you can manage it, that's a pretty cool surprise.
It is a really cool surprise. And
I imagine audiences at the time must have flipped.
Yes, and that's one of the things I also appreciate about Star Wars is a lot of times I think in today's society we're judged by the actions of our parents. We're judged by what groups we associate ourselves with. Like, there's the idea of... I'm going to get political here, but I mean, it's Star Wars, so it's a very political.
About half of Star Wars was political meetings. And...
Well, I mean, there's the idea of, with past history, a lot of our diplomatic nightmares are based in past skirmishes, past wars, hurt feelings on either side, and a lot of times we have to realize that people make their own choices. People are not their parents. They're not what ethnic, nationality, background. We need to realize that
people are people.
People, yeah, we need to look at each other. I think when it was Martin Luther King Junior said, we need to judge people by the content of their character.
Yeah.
So you have Luke Skywalker and everybody, everybody's telling him what he should do. Well, he should be a Jedi, he should be a Sith. And it gives him the opportunity of saying, well, I don't have to follow in my father's footsteps. I don't have to follow down that dark path. I can pave my own way and not be defined by the mistakes of my family, by the mistakes of the Jedi, any of that. So it does lend that whole light to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be really interesting seeing how the new ones go on with, you've got, Kylo, who is...
Oh my, don't get me started on Kylo.
Okay, before I begin, have you seen, what is it? Force Awakens and Rogue One?
Yes, I did.
So, okay, let's do one at a time. What did you think of Force Awakens?
At first I liked it, but then a few things came to my mind. When you watch something, sometimes your first impressions are right, sometimes they're wrong. And in this case, my first impressions were totally wrong. I thought it was a good movie, but then when I sat and thought about it, I realized that they essentially copied episode 4.
Yeah.
Same storyline, except let's build a bigger, quote-unquote, Death Star, or in this case, Star Killer base. And let's repeat the same storyline, but let's switch the roles. Instead of Luke Skywalker being on the desert planet waiting for his life to begin, you have a girl.
Yeah.
On a desert planet waiting for her life to begin. And then you have the whole aspect of the betrayal and, spoiler alert,
nobody hasn't seen that movie.
Well, I'm just trying to be nice. Anyway, the younger, in the sense, pupil, or in this case son, murdering the father figure in their life. So, and then of course end up blowing up.
Yeah, I guess that would be very similar to Anakin killing Obi-Wan.
Yes.
At the end of, what was the first one? Star Wars. It was just called Star Wars.
New Hope.
New Hope, thank you.
Well, the other problems I had with it was right after Star Wars became a franchise, many science fiction authors began writing their own stories. We call this the EU, or
the extended universe. Yeah.
Expanded universe.
Expanded? Oh, okay.
Expanded. And you had a myriad of new characters, and they essentially did what it's named for. They expanded the universe in adding characters such as Mara Jade, Han and Leia's own 3 children.
For those of you who don't know, Mara Jade was like a cool Sith lady who married Luke Skywalker, from what I understand.
that really bugged me. Essentially, to give you a quick storyline to Mara Jade and how awesome she is, she was like an inquisitor. For those of you who have seen Star Wars Rebels or have read any books that follow Revenge of the Sith, she was taken by Palpatine at a very young age, essentially raised to be a Inquisitor-like Dark Jedi. Her official title is the Emperor's Hand. And it's
a cool name.
Yeah, it is a very cool name. She and Darth Vader are always at odds, because while Vader is a Sith Lord and essentially chosen to succeed Palpatine, she is like Palpatine's daughter, since she was raised by him. So there's this...
Maybe his pet.
Well, you get a feel for sibling rivalry between the two. And so to make this quick, essentially, right when Palpatine is about to die, he sends a mental message to her telepathically saying, you need to kill Luke Skywalker. And so she tries to kill Luke Skywalker, and ironically they end up falling in love, and they have a son. Yeah, they have a son, and his name is actually Ben. Whereas,
like Kylo's name in Force Awakens.
Yes,
original.
But the difference is, and this is where it got really annoying for me. In the expanded universe, you've slit me up. In the expanded universe, Han and Leia actually have 3 children. They have a set of twins, Jaina and Jason, boy and a girl, and then they have a young son named Anakin, named, of course, after Anakin Skywalker. Now, Jason ends up turning to the dark side. So he was essentially plagiarized by J.J. Abrams and turned into Kylo Ren. So it was if J.J. Abrams did not lend credit to where credit was due, and he made what was Jason Solo into this wussy, whiny
Adam Driver character.
exactly.
I don't know. I like Kylo. I want to see him get more evil. Like, he was kind of a wuss, you're right, in the last one. But yeah, I like the fact that he's unpredictable. Like, he's so emotionally driven. He really does seem so much like Anakin.
But the problem is now what to go back to a previous point in the prequels. A lot of people were angry at the choice of actors for Anakin Skywalker. People say they hate Hayden Christensen, but you have to think about in this perspective. Lucas had to choose people that looked like the kids eventually. And when he chose Hayden Christensen has the same hair color as Luke Skywalker, also has the dimpled chin. So genetically speaking, they look very much alike. And Natalie Portman, of course, looking very much like Leia. So you have to have people that make biological sense in terms of genealogy and parentage. And the problem I found, and this is a minor problem, but it still sticks out, Kylo Ren does not look like Han or Leia. He kind of bears some of Han's features, the facial features, such as nose and bone structure, but hair and eye color, they don't
Would it have killed him to dye his hair like brown?
It doesn't lend itself very well. It doesn't look like Han or Leia, and it doesn't make sense biologically speaking how they look.
Yeah. You know, I understand the criticism of Hayden Christensen, but if you look back at him, anytime he wasn't talking, he looked scary. Like, he was legitimately scary. He made a great Darth Vader anytime he didn't open his mouth. Well, every time he opened his mouth, the illusion was gone.
Now, here's another point I want to touch on. Everybody says the acting in the prequels was horrendous, but when you look at the acting in the originals is great, but part of me sees it's not very believable, because when you look at the situations they're in, the situations that that the characters find themselves in don't really match their emotions. So what I mean to say is, let me give an example. When Alderaan is destroyed, Leia's sitting in her cell, and of course Luke Skywalker, trips in, and she just leans on her side, and she decides to be all snarky and say, "Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?" I mean, she just,
a cool line though.
it was cute and snarky, but her family, her people, an entire world just blew up.
And she's being snarky.
I mean, it doesn't seem believable that she is that altogether in that moment after watching about how many billion people die. And then Luke Skywalker is all mopey over Ben Kenobi, who he's known for literally one day. And Leia...
my father figure, who was never there, just like my real dad.
And then Leia's comforting him, and she's all mopey too. And it just doesn't lend itself to the situation of...
Well, I guess Leia would have known him, though, because she did, she sent out the message, right?
Yes, but at the same time, let's keep on track here that her father, her mom, her friends, her people are all dead. And here's, this general who's a family friend. Here's this new kid on the block, Luke Skywalker, and here she is comforting him when and she is a strong female character and everything, but
there's some emotion.
There's some, you would expect some breakdown, having some mental breakdown after witnessing instant genocide. Now, in the prequels, when Anakin's mother dies,
he went nuts.
He responds appropriately.
Well,
now, not appropriately in the sense that it was the right thing to do, but he responds in a way befitting a grieving son.
Yeah.
He acts sad. He then experiences all the stages of grief, and he goes full ape.
Yeah, you got to admit though that no at the end of the Darth Vader no, that was pretty awkward.
Well, I don't think it was. I don't think it was awkward necessarily. I think it might have sounded weird to some people, the first time hearing it. But
It's like a dying walrus.
well, Anakin and Anakin does have some. Well, I should say Hayden Christensen does have some very good moments. The problem is, especially, and I think a lot of the criticism came into place with episode 2. A lot of the lines that he exchanges between himself and Padme, the lines themselves are very beautiful, but they're just very poorly timed. They literally meet each other after this 10-year hiatus, and they're speaking about love, they're speaking about secrets, and it just seems very, very poorly timed. And while the script isn't bad, it's just not meshing. Yeah. Like, everything's just not meshing. Otherwise, everything would be good. You have to rearrange some certain elements of those two interacting. One of my friends suggested what would have been a good time to have a good first kiss with Padme would have been when they're riding the animals through the field and he falls off one of them and pretends to be hurt when he really just wants Padme to come over and check to see if he's okay. And then, of course, they go and they tumble together. That would have been a really good moment for a first kiss, I believe. Not when he's talking about how much he dislikes sand.
Yeah, but of course, it's irritating.
Well, now in his defense, in his defense, people like to blow his whole hatred of sand out of proportion. But let's face it, he lived on a desert planet for like how many years of his life?
I would hate sand too.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
And he doesn't really blow up about sand. He just comments on it. He's actually very nonchalant. People like to blow.
He's just grumping.
But
it's kind of like indicative of the rest of his character. He's whiny and grumpy all the time.
Padme is like, oh, I like to sun myself and lay on the sand,
which should have been what he was thinking about instead of sand.
But he responds like. He actually responds really nonchalantly. He's like, well, I don't like sand, it gets everywhere. And he's actually really calm.
Boy.
He's very calm and nonchalant about it. He's just expressing his opinion. People like to blow that line out of proportion. They like to say, oh my, he's obsessed with how much he hates sand. I'm like, no, he's actually pretty nonchalant about it. He's just expressing an opinion. And I think that shows a little bit of Anakin's character. You see throughout the movies, he doesn't feel like his opinion is appreciated. So I think in that instance, you're seeing Anakin having a conversation with a person who he feels isn't judging him. He's just having a conversation. Whereas in the beginning of episode 2, Obi-Wan's lecturing him, telling him what to do, telling him, do this, do that, and I'm not... we're not going to discuss this and you need to control yourself. And he's just having a conversation. So that was, I feel like, a really good point in pointing out the relationship between the two of them.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about The Force Awakens a little bit. I really liked it, honestly.
It was a good movie, I believe, but when you've been raised on the expanded universe and
you're just an EU snob.
But the thing is, this is how I feel. It's like when you're a comic book fan, I know. And
I'm the comic book fan.
Yes, you are the absolute comic book fan, I know. And let's say you had the Batman trilogy. The Batman trilogy, everything was good, but people are writing extra stories. Everything's cohesive, everything's flowing along. And you've accepted certain truths about Batman. And let's scrap the whole trilogy, just Batman in general. There are certain things we've accepted as true. Bruce Wayne's parents are killed in an alley. Joker is one of his greatest arch nemesis. He's part of the Justice League. And, of course, there's some spin-offs, but there are certain things that you accept as truth. And the expanded universe for 30 years, mind you, starting around the 80s to current present day, time, was considered canon. Mm-hmm. People just accepted it. It had the Lucas stamp of approval. Mostly accepted. It was published in the Star Wars books, all the expanded universe characters, and you just accept it as truth. And then along comes Disney, and says, well, we're going to shake things up. And then Jar Jar Abrams says, well,
Jar Jar
yes,
Abrams.
says, I'm just going to ignore the fact because, like, everything you know. Like,
Oh boy, let's murder everything.
well, the thing was, and one of the things that upset me with the Force Awakens was they made Leia into a general. Leia was in the expanded universe. Let me shed some light on what Leia became in the expanded universe. She became Chancellor, essentially, of the Alliance. She became President of the galaxy. She's a Grand Jedi Master. She has now newfound Force abilities. She is so much more powerful, and you just demoted her to General.
But at the same time, like, this is a...
You went from
Carrie
being
Fisher
president...
was old.
Well,
Can you imagine her flipping around and...
She didn't... Well, okay,
being a
first of
Master
all,
Jedi
if you
person.
can CGI Christopher Lee, who was in his 80s when he did Revenge of the... he was in his early 80s when he did Revenge of the Sith, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Point made.
No, if early 80s, if not late 70s. And if you can CGI him doing stuff, you can CGI Leia doing stuff.
They couldn't even CGI her face for 10 seconds during Rogue One.
I will say this, her CGI'd face was more impressive than Peter Cushing's.
Come on.
Than Peter Cushing's CGI face. Like, when you saw his face, you knew it was CGI. Now, what was interesting in Episode 3, when you see Tarkin, of course, you see Tarkin at a distance. You don't see him up close. And, of course, you're going to expect Tarkin to be younger because Episode 3 is 19 years before A New Hope. And you only see him at a distance. So we could pass that off. Now, to engage with Tarkin, you would need someone who...
I don't know why they didn't... Okay, let's move on to Rogue One.
Okay.
I don't know why they didn't just use the other dude. Why did they have to put Tarkin in so often? Because he looked like a plastic thing, like a mannequin.
Peter Cushing's dead.
Yeah,
so
I know, but
we
they
can't
didn't
use
need it.
Peter Cushing anymore.
That's the point. They didn't need Peter Cushing. It's like you've got this other guy who was playing that part, the guy in the white that clearly had Napoleon syndrome. But why not just use him? He was a good character. Why did you need
Tarkin plays a significant role. He plays.
But we all know what he does.
I mean, he plays a very, very significant role in the films, and the fact that he is the new... How do I say this? He's one of the Emperor's favorites. He's clearly gained enough influence to tell Vader what to do. If you remember in A New Hope, when Darth Vader is choking the life out of one of the moths for smack talking the Force, Tarkin is the one that tells him, hey, Vader, you need to, release him. And even Leia recognizes that Tarkin has significant influence over Darth Vader when she says, oh, Darth Vader's on your leash. So...
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Rogue One for a little while.
Okay, good.
What did you think of Rogue One?
I thought Rogue One was a very good bridge between Episode 3 and 4. What I flipped out over when I watched it was when you saw Bail Organa. Bail Organa being Leia's adopted father. Now, of course, what it kind of annoyed me is they didn't mention him by name, but if anybody had seen Episode 3, you know it's Bail Organa.
Yeah, you know who it was.
So it was really cool seeing Bail Organa from Episode 3, like taking someone from the prequels and putting them into the new setting. And just, it was interesting because maybe I'm overemphasizing this, but he really bridged the gap between the two episodes. So I thought that was...
So you liked Rogue One?
I liked Rogue One. It definitely explained the whole intricacies of what's going on. And another thing it really did, it brought out a lot of nitty-gritty fight scenes that we don't really see in either the prequels or the originals.
See, I was actually a little disappointed by Rogue One because we were sold this is how they get the plans to the Death Star. Mm-hmm. And like only about half the movie was actually about getting the plans to the Death Star. Honestly, I would have been more interested if most of the movie had been about getting the plans of the Death Star. And I'm not sure why all of the characters needed to die at the end of it.
I think
Other than they wanted to try something that was more, gritty.
in Star Wars, what I've noticed is we tend to be underwhelmed by mass death. And we are only
It's a
touched.
horrible thing.
No, we are only affected when major characters die.
Yeah, when it's someone you know, that makes sense.
And so, and of course that that makes sense in any genre, but in the originals, okay, a planet is completely destroyed. A bunch of fighter pilots are just mowed down by the emperor and everything. It's just you don't really get a feel for mass death. Like, okay, people are dying here, and you don't really get a taste of how cruel
You definitely
the
felt
Empire.
it. I will say that is one thing. You definitely felt it in Rogue One.
Yes. Now, and that's another thing to circle back to the prequels. When you watch episode 3, you are hit very hard in the feels. When you see the younglings, you don't even have to see.
That was horrible.
You don't even have to see
Hated
the
that
younglings.
scene.
What was really good about episode 3 was you didn't have to see Anakin mow down all these kids. You saw the Jedi being killed one by one. Of course, you see Yoda nearly having a coronary because he's feeling all these people that he most likely trained die, and he's
Poor Yoda.
feeling the imminent betrayal. And in Rogue One, you get a taste of that as well, but then you get an actual taste on a larger scale. Whereas with the originals, you feel sad when your favorite character dies. In the prequels, you feel sad that, okay, all these characters die and all these innocent people die. Whereas in Rogue One, you get a taste of, oh my, this entire planet is being imploded, essentially. And you see...
Yeah, because you have characters. You have enough characters that you kind of you get to see it from everyone's perspective. And they've spread out so much, you really see it. You
really get a taste of the Empire's cruelty, because it's kind of washed over. I mean, you get the tones of, okay, they're space Nazis, hence stormtroopers, everything like that. The whole archetypes of the Nazi stereotypes that you see throughout Star Wars. But you really get a taste of what authoritarian dictatorship would look like on a galactic level, and you really get a feel of, okay, this is serious stuff.
Yeah. My main criticism with Rogue One is that you talked about in some of the originals that the acting seemed sort of bland, like they weren't reacting right. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like that was what it was like in Rogue One. It felt like the actors weren't reacting enough. It felt
it
felt really muted. I wanted the actors to have enough emotion about anything, but most of the time they were just sort of staring blankly
I think there was so much action going on and so much happening, you really didn't have time to stop for emotions to kind of take place. And that's how it is mostly in warfare scenarios. You have to keep going. You have to keep moving, essentially. And of course, there were some times where they stopped and took a moment and said, okay, let's deal with ourselves, like when Jyn is mourning her father and she's...
Yeah, but even then, it was just could you act a little more depressed or something? It's what? Or angry or something. It was just most of the time their reactions were so muted. There were a couple of scenes.
I don't know. Their robot sidekick.
The robot sidekick was the only one with any sort of emotion at all, and he was a robot.
What I loved about him what I loved about him when he's about to say, "I have a bad feeling," and then they say, "Shut up," because that line is repeated
in every movie,
every single movie, and everybody in the theater. Well, everybody in the theater erupted with laughter because we saw it coming, and then it was like, no, denied. Denied, you can't say it. And it was beautiful. It was definitely beautiful. Now, what I didn't appreciate in both Force Awakens and Rogue One was that you kind of had this overly used sarcasm that you
like
find
the sarcasm.
Well, the thing is, you have this, like, all these snappy comebacks, and you see Disney coming through. And the thing is, with Star Wars, the snappy comebacks are supposed to be more subtle. You see in both. They're maybe a little bit more pronounced in the prequels, but in both Star Wars, they're more subtle, they're more clever, whereas in Rogue One and Force Awakens, it's like, let's keep it coming, like you would see in the Avengers franchise.
Well, it was J.J. Abrams, so.
Well, in the Disney, essentially in the Disney franchise, you're seeing that come through, and it's like, okay, people, let's calm down a little bit. This is getting a little...
Yeah, I see what you
taking
mean.
ourselves away from what the essence of Star Wars is.
I kind of thought it was interesting because I kind of thought that Rogue One and Force Awakens were sort of opposites, because I thought that Force Awakens had like a really strong first and second act, and then the climax was kind of boring and sort of lackluster. But with Rogue One, I thought the first and second act were kind of boring and dull, but I really love that climax made up for the whole movie. That was so cool. That Darth Vader scene alone made up for the whole movie.
Well, everybody knew...
And Darth Vader's dad joke. Don't choke on your aspirations. That was the best.
Well, see, that actually was amazing for me, because it looked like Hayden Christensen was playing that part. It's like, oh my, Anakin's still alive. He's
corny jokes. Oh my gosh.
He has his bad jokes, and so that kind of made that. Well, it made us all laugh, but I found you see a more brutal side of Darth Vader. And everybody knew. I mean, they were saying, people who were giving insight to Rogue One before it came out said there was going to be Darth Vader exacting brutality on everybody, and I was waiting for it to happen. And you don't see much of him. You only see a few snippets of him, and then
it was like in Suicide Squad. Everyone wanted to see the Joker. We got like 30 seconds of the Joker.
I'm not even gonna get started. The Joker, Jared
we'll have another day.
Yeah, well have another, but I'm not a huge
We're talking
fan
about Star Wars.
Jared Leto.
Yeah. I really wanted to see more of Darth Vader, but I know that that's not the purpose of it. I'm really interested to see how they're going to do the Han Solo movie. That's going to be really interesting.
Well, on Han Solo, and I wonder how much of the expanded universe they're going to include, because Han Solo has a very good backstory. And for those who've read the expanded universe, you get to see a side of him that we don't really, that I don't think is really portrayed well in the original trilogy, because we see Han Solo in his backstory, in his books, as this whole different person, as a caring person, as someone who isn't completely selfish and looking out for his own self-interests. And if
he grows a little bit.
He has a lot of honor. I feel like in his, if you've ever read the Han Solo trilogy.
Honor among smugglers, I suppose.
Well, he's not a thief. He was essentially he was a mule. He was essentially a space mule.
That is what a smuggler is.
Not necessarily. He when I say a mule, I mean he smuggled drugs. You can be a smuggler and smuggle in, other sorts of contraband that isn't necessarily drug related, but the reason why he's in debt to Jabba is because he had to dump a whole crate of spice, which was essentially drugs, to evade a Imperial patrol.
Oh, okay. So I did not know that.
Yeah.
See, I read like one Star Wars book like a long time ago, and it was weird. I don't remember. It
is very weird, and there are some interesting things you learn about the different species. Of course, we saw this in the Clone Wars movie. We find out that Jabba the Hutt is because he's a worm, of course, and that makes sense. He's a hermaphrodite.
Worm? I have never thought that I just thought he looked like,
well, slug.
Slug. It's like he looked like some sort of like body part that fell off and festered. He's an unfortunate looking creature. Speaking of Clone Wars, have you seen the cartoon? My dad was watching that recently.
I wasn't very much into the cartoons. Pretty much I wanted to stick to mostly the movies and then the books.
Because the cartoon's still canon.
Oh yes, the
counts as
cartoon.
canon.
Oh yes, and the cartoon definitely. There's not really anything within the cartoon because they're their own separate entities that deal specifically with Anakin and Ahsoka's relationship as well as the whole clones in general. It doesn't really come into much interference with the canon and the movies and any other thing in general. It doesn't essentially bother that portion. I haven't been able to watch those as of yet.
Yeah, I saw a couple of episodes when I was babysitting, and I was surprised by how dark they were.
It
was surprisingly dark. I'm like sitting here with this like 6-year-old kid watching this. I'm like, why are you allowed to watch this?
Sometimes, well, there from the episodes
there's so much murder.
From the episodes I did see, the ones that I was able to see, it does get very creepy at times, and there are
Animation's
instances.
odd too.
And that was another thing. The animation was it a bit turned me off to the whole thing, but
It grows on you.
I got into Rebels, and Rebels was a very good, I believe, a very good show.
What is Rebels?
Rebels is
Is that
essentially
new?
Okay, so Rebels, you mentioned the Clone Wars. Well, think of Rebels, same style of animation, but follows 15 years after Revenge of the Sith. So, but what's interesting is they reintroduced the characters from Clone Wars.
Oh, that's cool.
Into Rebels. So they include Ahsoka, they include some of the clones, and they have the continuation of the story. And you learn several things. You learn, like where Ahsoka is doing after all this time. Like you realize, oh yes, she did escape Order 66. And
Well, that's nice, I guess.
yes, and you learn about the rebellion, how the rebels are kind of coalescing, coming together. But what was really interesting about Rebels is that they introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn, and he is a major character in the expanded universe, and he ends up causing a lot of trouble once the Empire is defeated because he was a great ally of the Empire. So it lends the question, how much of the expanded universe are they going to include? Because they've already decided, well, we're going to keep Thrawn. Are we going to include
so I got a question for you about the expanded
anybody
universe.
else?
Would you called it plagiarism when you were talking about The Force Awakens. But I mean, wouldn't it be nice if they're gonna go ahead and retcon it? Why don't they just use some of the state? Would you not like to see more of the expanded universe?
I want to see the expanded universe. I don't want to see it destroyed. I don't want to see it taken and mangled into something completely not its own. And because of this whole mangling of what we consider to be true Star Wars canon, you essentially, all these books that were beautifully written and they all are consistent. It's amazing how people have interwoven it to make it fairly consistent, have left gaping holes essentially with this new canon that they're calling. It's left a lot of gaping holes, whereas the expanded universe was fairly consistent and authors working around each other trying to make everything fit. And there's a lot more, I feel like, character development that went into the expanded universe than there ever was with this new canon.
Okay. I see. Okay. I kind of see what you mean.
Yes.
I think it's going to be really interesting.
And plus Mara Jade, I mean, why I mean,
really like Mara Jade.
I really love, well, I mean, you can't help but love Mara Jade, and it's like, yes, please give Luke Skywalker his wife back. I mean, come on,
I'm getting the feeling. Okay, so I was about to say something, but I want to sort of end on, what are your predictions for The Last Jedi?
I mean, we're probably going to see Luke Skywalker is going to be flushed out of hiding. He has to confront Kylo Ren, and what
do you think about Kylo? What do you think is going to happen to him?
I think essentially he and Rey and Luke are going to have a confrontation where he ends up having to battle Rey. He's going to go through Luke Skywalker, and then he's going to try and take over Rey, and then trying to use Rey to join him in overthrowing. I
he
think
he sort of made like a half effort to try to do that at the end
I'm
of Force
thinking
Awakens.
what we're going to see is we're going to see essentially episode 5 redone again.
Maybe.
We're going to see essentially episode 5 redone over, because you see the parallelisms now that now that it's coming all towards me. So in episode 5, Darth Sidious tells Vader, okay, you have to kill Luke Skywalker because he would overthrow us. So then you have Snoke saying, well, Skywalker's going to emerge and we have to essentially take him out. Then you show
nobody
pictures.
Worried about Rey.
Yeah, well, then you show Rey being trained. Luke was being trained by Yoda.
Yeah.
To have the final showdown.
I would like to see them do something different. And the one thing that I would love...
And that was another thing with the expanded universe. The expanded universe, there are more than... There's ample material from books that you could easily make into a movie. Now, of course, not everybody's read the expanded universe, so you can still have the element of surprise. But you have the ample amount of material. I think if we could have done a movie based off of Children of the Jedi or Heir to the Empire, I mean, it would have made a very good storyline for a movie.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing that I want to see is I want to see Kylo Ren as bad as he can possibly be. I do want to see him redeemed eventually, but I want him to be bad because he spent so much of the first movie just waffling back and forth. I want to see him commit to the dark side. I want to see as bad as he can get. And I want to see Rey get thrashed. Because that was ridiculous how fast she picked up the Force.
That did really annoy me. Now this, I'll say this. Children, from watching Star Wars, children who've had Force-sensitive parents or Jedi parents tend to be the strongest in the Force.
So who do we think Rey's parents are?
You notice with just before I answer that, I believe essentially the reason why Jedis didn't allow for attachment, one, because they didn't want all the negative acts, what they thought were negative aspects of attachment, and jealousy and love they thought were bad. They thought all these emotions.
Idiots.
Yeah, it was stupid. But I also believe the reason why they didn't want, especially children being born of Jedis, is then it would establish legacies and dynasties, and then people trying to necessarily overthrow each other. Like you see in Harry Potter. In Harry Potter, you have Draco Malfoy's family and the Malfoy clan who believe in only purebred wizards. Wizards should only have wizard spouses, and anybody who intermarries with a muggle
you really need to finish that series so we can talk about it.
Yeah, okay, but that's for no time. Yeah. But essentially there's this what would you call it? I don't know, you wouldn't call it racist, but you looking down on people. So
prejudice. Yeah,
there's the prejudice. There is the superiority complex. That's what I'm looking for. The superiority complex that follows that, and when you see with the Skywalker clan, and even in the expanded universe, the Force is passed down. It's hereditary, and with those who've had Jedi parents, tend to be the strongest Force users than someone who's just randomly born with the Force than anybody else.
Do you think we have two descendants of Skywalkers here? Do we think we have Leia's kid and Luke's kid?
I'm really not seeing Luke necessary, and I've been wrong before. I've been wrong before on certain predictions. Like when no one foresaw Han Solo's death in.
Are you kidding me? Everyone foresaw it.
I didn't.
You were willfully ignorant about that.
I was willfully, because I mean it's Star Wars. I mean nobody foresaw. I mean, in the 70s, nobody foresaw Luke Skywalker being the descendant of Darth Vader. No one foresaw that. So
that's a little different than Han Solo dying.
But essentially, with Rey, I don't really see her being Luke Skywalker's child. I could see her being Han Solo's child. And that's another thing with the expanded universe, because with the expanded universe, you had Kylo Ren was based off of what I said earlier, off of Jason Solo. And
But we're pretty sure that
he was based off of Jason
that-
Solo, and he mentions when Kylo is talking to Rey, he's talking to her, he's like, oh yeah, you see him as this like father figure, well, you're going to be disappointed. And you see Han Solo kind of having this, like, he wants to be involved in Rey's life, like offering her to be a smuggler with him, essentially. You see that, like, is if he's trying to establish some sort of, like,
I don't think
parent and child relationship, but that's what I feel. And
I think he's just trying. Honestly, I think at that point he's just trying to replace.
But this is
Ben.
where I feel like we're, like I said earlier, with the plagiarism of the expanded universe, Jason, or as he becomes Darth Caedus in the expanded universe, is then...
Which is a much cooler name than Kylo Ren.
It is cooler. Yes, it is. Ends up being killed by his sister, Jaina. And it begs the question, okay, in terms of that nemesis, is the next director going to take a page out of that? Is he going to then make Rey his nemesis as Jaina was
Well,
nemesis?
she's already basically.
Well,
his
I mean,
nemesis.
yes,
but the question is it his cousin?
I don't think necessarily they're cousins if they're kissing cousins, because you see a lot of sexual. See, and that's another thing. I don't really see them. I don't really see them as cousins. I see them as either siblings, or Rey being completely non-Skywalker Solo related at all. Because
There's some theory that she's maybe a Kenobi.
The thing
be
is with
weird.
Kenobi, yeah, to say that Kenobi doesn't, have ladies crawling over him would be, a lie, because if we go back to the books, he had a very strong relationship with one of his fellow Jedis. He and not to the extent where it was romantic. And then in Clone Wars, her name is I think her name escapes me. I think it's Sabine or something like that. Diplomat, who they had some romantic attachment. Neither one of them.
Okay.
Neither one of them would admit. And then of course she admits at the very end, right before she dies, "I've always loved you," essentially. So
Ouch.
and of course Obi-Wan's crush, but it's not really. Obi-Wan is like that straight
He's had
arrow.
a tough life.
The thing is, Obi-Wan is that it would definitely be interesting to see him. Of course, Rey can't be his child, maybe his grandchild.
Yeah.
But it would really essentially destroy his whole character, because if you look at Obi-Wan tries to be by the book.
Mm-hmm.
When Qui-Gon Jinn, his master, is, gallivanting about saying, "I'm going to take Anakin and make him my new Padawan, and I don't care what the Jedi Council says, and I'm going to do whatever the heck I want because I'm Qui-Gon Jinn," and yada, yada, yada.
Obi-Wan's like, "But rules, dude!"
Yeah, essentially, Obi-Wan Kenobi is saying, keeps telling him, "You could have been on the Jedi Council had you not, done all this stupid stuff," Qui-Gon Jinn, and he lectures Anakin continually. He usually does not do anything stupid. Of course, there is that one time where he jumps out the window after the assassin droid who comes into Padme's room.
That's a little different.
But he rarely does things that are outside of the rules or without telling someone. I
get it. It's pretty unlikely. Okay, so one last prediction question. Do you think that they're gonna kill Luke?
I hope not. I really hope not, because Luke Skywalker is one of those characters. It takes a lot to kill him, I feel like.
Does he die in any of the expanded books?
Eventually he does. He does, but not for a long, long time. I mean, it's evident that he does, but...
He is old as dirt in this one.
I mean, eventually he does
Also,
die.
do you think he'll have lines at all? Can we let him talk?
I mean,
Our
of
camel's
course.
amazing. Can we please let the man talk?
I mean, they're obviously going to let him talk. He's obviously, I mean, he can't do everything, through stairs and small movements of his cloak. He has to do something else.
He's just gonna force talk in her head. Is that a thing? Force talking?
There is, well, as I said earlier, you can telepathically communicate with people.
It's all gonna be telepathy. He's not gonna actually talk.
Well,
they're gonna dub over him with someone else. Poor guy.
What I found now, just to add my last,
I mean, they basically turned Luke Skywalker into an extra in a Star Wars movie.
It was a beautiful extra, kind of like how CGI Leia was a beautiful extra in Rogue One.
Yeah, but even CGI Leia talked.
Well, the thing is real, but it was real Mark Hamill as opposed to not CGI'd young Carrie Fisher. So it lent more presence than I think CGI Leia did.
I suppose. It was a cool shot at any case.
It was. Both were cool shots.
All right, so that's about all the time we have for now. I personally think they're probably going to kill off Luke. So we will see which of us is right. But until then, thank you, Sharon, for coming on Contra Mundum. I had a lot of fun, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, until then, thank you guys, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.